With their Pixel phones, Google tries to control both the hardware and the software to give its users the best experience possible. And recently, there have even been claims of them trying to work on their own SOCs to even control the components of the phone. Doesn't this whole strategy sound familiar? Hey, I'm Brian and welcome to Explained and Talked About. To digest all this, let's start with a little bit of what makes this thought come up in the first place. For basically all of Android's history, Google was building the OS and licensing it to other OEMs, who then modified it and built hardware for it. This is arguably how Android became this big. There are lots of different devices at different price points from different companies, but they all run the same underlying operating system, which makes it a platform with lots of users that it's worth to develop for. And a huge app ecosystem is still key these days. But with all that diversity also comes the usual problem people have with Android: fragmentation and thus a non-coherent experience. Apple has always been the opposing pole to that by building their own devices and also the software for them, which made them able to have control over every little aspect of the ecosystem. This is the praised optimization of iOS because of which so many people use it. But now, Google might be wanting to adapt Apple's strategy to the Android market. Now last year, Google made a fundamental shift in their strategy by releasing the first smartphone built by themselves, the Pixel. Yes, it's still technically manufactured by HTC, but all of the design and component choices still come from Google. Now there was some criticism that by creating their own smartphone, Google might also be creating competition for the OEMs that license their OS. This might offend those manufacturers that Google needs in order to sustain their ecosystem. So the Pixel might not actually be that great of an idea from that standpoint. This doesn't change the fact, however, that the tech media was very impressed by Google's attempt at building a phone. The Pixel wasn't the best when it comes to design or features, but it got the basics right with the camera and the specs and delivered the best Android experience on any phone thanks to Google controlling the software. Now this all sounds very familiar to what Apple does so well with the iPhone. They control the hardware, they even build their own components in-house, and they also create the software that runs on their hardware themselves. This leads to the very coherent and optimized experience on iOS. There's no part of the experience that Apple can't control. This whole optimized ecosystem strategy is, I think, the distinguishing part with Apple. You could argue that they're not as innovative as they used to be, but what they do very well is taking something that exists and making it the best experience possible. And this formula is also what makes them the most money. 92% of all profit in the smartphone game goes to Apple. On Android, this was very different up till now, with the fragmentation and lack of optimization I mentioned before. Recently, there have even been reports of Google wanting to develop their own SOCs, or smartphone CPUs, in-house to control even more aspects of their product, just like Apple does it. Though to be clear, this hasn't been confirmed yet. Now of course you could argue that Samsung is also building their own SOCs, but they're not in the same position that Google is in. They don't control the OS. And because Google has so much power by controlling the established Android operating system, they're really the only company that can feasibly pull it off to replicate Apple's strategy. But even if they can, why would they want to do it in the first place? From how they've priced and marketed the Pixel phones, one could assume that Google wants to go after the iPhone, and that makes sense. If they want to build an Android experience that is similarly optimized and coherent to the iPhone, then going after the audience that wants that experience might be the right thing to do. But then there are still two questions. Is the audience that Google wants to attract really there? Are there enough people that want their phone to just work and just be great for Snapchat that also happen to be wanting an Android phone? I don't know, but I'm not convinced. If you want that experience, then why consider Android at all? Most people who use iPhones aren't that tech savvy. More than you think don't even know that Android doesn't equal Samsung. And that's not even factoring in yet that a Pixel doesn't have the same status symbol appeal as an iPhone. But being the opposing pole to iOS is what ultimately led to Android being this successful. So why change the strategy? OEMs like Samsung just look at this with concern. That's why they're already starting to build their own services to rely less on Google, as I already explained in that video. And alienating their partners can't be in Google's best interest. It's interesting that it looks like Google, of all companies, is now building not that innovative phones, but ones with the most optimized user experience, just like Apple. What may also be an interesting coincidence is that with this year's flagships, Google and Apple are both moving toward a more fresh design with the Pixel 2 and the iPhone 8, while they've had unassuming designs last year. Now you can take from that what you want, but apparently both don't want to have the image of just having the optimize and make the most money image. I mean, there were already people saying that Microsoft was the most innovative powerhouse now that Apple and Google are moving toward the optimization business. Though the Surface Laptop is now also kind of a product that I feel falls more into the category of the Pixel. But I think I'll leave it at that for my thoughts. Now what do you think of this? Do you like Google's approach and the idea of an Android phone that follows the same principles as the iPhone? Or are you more into the huge diversity and uniqueness that Android brings to the table? Because those two things are really hard at coexisting. By following Apple's strategy, Google is going against the very principles that have made Android what it is. But no matter what you think, let me know down in the comments below, or tweet it at me. And if you want to look further into all of this, I put some links in the description and in the cards up there for you to dig deeper. Now I hope you liked this video. If you did, press the according button down under it and get subscribed to the channel for more content like this delivered straight to you. There's also a playlist where you'll find previous episodes. I want to encourage you to click follow on Twitter, I'm very active there, and visit the website where you'll find the written version of this and other interesting articles. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!